Before we go with the proceedings of today, we're just going to give some time for announcements. I think the first one is around the CPD accreditation. So please remember that this is a CPD accredited event. It is necessary to please visit the reception area. For the delegates who registered, to please confirm attendance. Please look for the signs at reception to guide you, because I can assure you that these two ladies here, as nice as they are, after 5 years, they will be asking you, have you tallied up your CPD points? And you'll remember this day. And you remember that this abnormal guy, as to borrow the words of Minister Ramukhopa, reminded you to go and get your CBT points. But then it will be too late. So please, let's get our CPD accreditation done. Announcement number 2. Now, while some of you might think that we were just wanting to make this conference 4 days so that you can have a social day tomorrow, no, we still have an order of business. We have site visits, and there are 2 site visits for Thursday tomorrow. It is important that we register for the site visits so that our organizing team can make the necessary arrangements for us to go to the site visits. Please, after this session, I would encourage you to go to the reception and register for site visits. I think here, in the spirit of engineering, engineers, we love prerequisites. I think site visit registration must be a prerequisite for tonight's gala dinner. I think we might get a lot of traction for that. Then lastly, the business matchmaking. This event is not just for us to deliberate on issues, challenges, and things we can do for the fraternity, but it's also for us to collaborate and create opportunities that we can take together in order for the betterment of society. So please, let us make use of the business matchmaking service, which the information is also available at reception. Now, on a lighter note, I must say I was a bit surprised yesterday, or not used to our esteemed engineer Buthelezi being referred to President Buthelezi, given that recently we have just lost a senior statesman in South Africa, Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who oftentimes also acted as president. So, President Buthelezi, that is how I'm going to address you going forward. And now, if engineers, you think that I'm just that brilliant and come up with content to share with you on this stage, you are very mistaken. I sit and talk to people and hear your stories and see the funny angle from it. So those civil engineers I was sitting with yesterday, you know yourselves. Civil engineers believe they're the only engineering in the world. And a joke was told. There was a debate around, if God was an engineer, which engineer would it be? So, of course, the civil engineers did think it was a civil engineer, but the mechanical engineer said, look at the joints, look at the mobility. We can run, we can walk, we can eat. He definitely was a mechanical engineer. Of course, the electrical engineers, we said, guys, look at the secretary. Hit your toe and tell me how that pain gets to your brain. God is therefore an electrical engineer. But the debate went on. Then someone said, but hang on, who runs a sewer system right in the middle of the site, and it passes through next to a recreational area? So unfortunately, the civil engineers still are on top and continue to give us beautiful buildings, beautiful sites, allow us, which have enabled us to come to the events today. Lastly, please remember there is a gala dinner today. Look lovely. Let's come and celebrate our award winners and our fraternity together. Remember, our theme is celebrating and growing engineering excellence. Tonight we do the celebrating part. Without any further ado, we're going to start off with remarks from our ECIC South Africa representative. We have the acting CEO, Mr. Nchengezeni Mapura. A round of applause for him, please.
Sorry, it's my presentation already. Okay. So whilst waiting for my presentation to be loaded, I think for me it's an honor and privilege, to grace this occasion, especially talking about ECIC and the work that we've been doing in supporting infrastructure projects. ECIC is it can be described as the best, kept secret. We are not a well-known organization, but, the kind of infrastructure projects that we support, they've got a very huge impact. Firstly, before I go into my presentation, I just want to recognize the various presidents of the different engineering heads and some of the distinguished guests. Now, ECIC is the Export Credit Insurance Corporation of South Africa. It was formed in 2001, and to date, we've been in business for 22 years, supporting exports of goods and services from South Africa. So just before I get into the infrastructure project that we've supported, I just want to share with you some of the key facts on the things that we've achieved before. Sorry, how do I move this? So our mission is to provide insurance solutions in support of South African goods and services. And we do that by applying best practice underwriting and risk management principles. So basically, we are an insurance company, but we're a very specialized insurance company. We're the export credit agency of South Africa. So obviously, one will ask, why an insurance company getting involved, in infrastructure projects? Obviously, we provide a value proposition. There are risks that are associated with any project. And most of these risks are political risks, and some of them are commercial risks. And then in terms of our vision, we want to be a world-class export credit insurer in facilitating South African export trade and cross-border investment globally. So part of our product offering, we provide insurance to cover loans that finance projects, and then we also provide cover to investments that are made in supporting those projects. I'm struggling with technology. Okay. Yeah. So who are we? I've already said we were established in 2001, but the export credit business has been there since 1957. Prior to 2001, our government acted as a reinsurer. The business was primarily done by a private insurance company called CGSC. That's the one that was doing the business on behalf of government. But in 2001, we ended up with the ECIC being formed. We are 100% owned by government, and we report to the DTIC. We are a regulated entity. We report to the PA. We also report to the Financial Sector Conduct Authority. Our covers that we provide are mainly in rands as well as US dollars. But over the years, we have seen that our portfolio has grown mainly into projects that are written in US dollars. So we've got very little exposure in terms of the rand currency. But we are still open to do business in rands. Can you assist me with moving that? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. Thanks. Yeah. And our mandate, we facilitate export of capital goods as well as consumables. So in terms of the services, obviously this will include engineering services. You know, we're talking about feasibility studies that are done for projects. We're talking about the costing of project, the design aspects of the projects. So those are some of the engineering services that we consume as ECIC. So those reports are very key in determining the bankability of the project, whether the project is economically viable or not. That will depend on those reports. And we review them very rigorously in order to ensure that the project that we support is economically viable. Now, in terms of the business lines that we have, we've got what we call the MLT, insurance business. This is the medium to long term, where we support projects that have got a repayment period of not less than 2 years and above. So these are projects that we have, long span of delivery, ranging from 12 months to 6 months, and then obviously the loan financing that support the project that needs to be repaid. Maybe the repayment period would be 5 years, 6, 7 years. So it depends on each particular project, what are the loan terms that we'll be looking at. And then we further underwrite pre and post shipment. What do I mean by pre and post shipment? We underwrite contractors cover a risk here, where the contractor is delivering a project. Obviously, some of the goods will be manufactured before they're delivered to the intended sites. So obviously, that pre-shipment, works that are done before pre-shipment, it's very key that we look at them. It's very key that we cover the exporter. If there's any risk that happens in the designated country that prevents the delivery of those goods, obviously, ECIC will chip in and make the exporter good. Then we also underwrite investments. These are shareholder loans and hard equities. These are monies that are provided, by shareholders to sponsor projects. So obviously, depending on the arrangements, the nature of the project that is being underwritten, the extent of the equity that is being provided. So we'll look at all the terms, of that financing. And then we will provide, our insurance cover. And again here, we provide mainly political risk insurance. I will touch on the elements of the risk that we cover later on. Then recently, we have been authorized to provide short-term insurance. And here, we are playing in the short-term insurance market. And obviously, the key driver of this business is the master plans that have been, established by the DTIC. And these master plans, they focus on three priority areas: textile, furniture, steel, automotive, agro-processing, and other sectors. And the facilities that we provide for the short term is working capital facilities. Obviously, before the exporter exports, you need to manufacture some of these goods. It could be machinery, equipment, It could be furniture, that needs to be delivered elsewhere. It has to be manufactured. So the working capital facilities, products are there to support this. And obviously, we do not provide funding directly, so we work with a suite of banks. Most of the 4 big banks, that exist in SA, like Standard Bank, Investec, R&B, as well as NetBank, we work very closely with them. And we also work with some of the DFIs, GBSA and IDC, and some of the institutional investors, your Sanlams, your OMAMs, they are providing some of the liquidity to support these projects. Then recently, we have come up with a new product called the trade credit insurance. This is the main driver of private insurance. We didn't have it in our suite, but it's a very interesting development in our case. And this product allows us to deal with the exporter directly without the involvement of a bank. So which means that we can look at the exporter's balance sheet, trade history with the foreign buyers, and then we provide a limit, for trading. And obviously, we look at the purchase orders, what are the payment terms? Is it 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days? So that is very important. And then the other product that we have got is bonds. Performance bonds are likely required for any infrastructure project. And then the advance payment bond as well. This is required for the upfront deposit that is made to allow for the early works to happen. And then we've got retention and reclamation bonds as well, that we also provide insurance. Now, coming to the risks that we cover. What are these key risks? We provide 2 types of risks. It's political risk and it's commercial risk. The other category I just said is, other risk. But under our political risk, you've got different elements. And these are adverse actions by the host government, where projects are located. The first one will be change in law. Obviously, if there is adverse change in law that is targeted to a particular project, then ECIC will chip in. As long as the project, or the bank has suffered a loss, or the exporter has suffered a loss, then we will chip in to make good, any loss that has been suffered. And then the second one is expropriation. Here we're talking about expropriation of goods, or the project itself, or the assets. So that's very important. Then the other element is around transfer restriction or currency convertibility. Again here, because, most of the countries on the continent, they've got, serious challenges with currency inconvertibility. And this volatility, it has to be managed somehow. And sometimes it can't be managed. There are countries that do not have local currencies, so to speak. They do have pseudo-currencies. And that just shows you the kind of risk that we're looking at. And obviously, our cover is in dollars. And then we will look at the local currency, how is it been performing, against the dollar. What is the exchange rate regime, All of those things are very important. Again, looking at the import cover, very important. And make sure that the country has got foreign reserves to be able to meet those payments. So obviously, if the currency deteriorates, against the US dollar, it's a very key problem. And then in our case, if there's no hard currency, to even meet those repayment obligations, then that's a key problem. And then if you're an investor, you're operating a mobile operation that generates, primarily local currency. You have to convert the local currency into hard currency. So if there's shortages of hard currency, then obviously that's where ECIC's insurance becomes very handy, because we are able to compensate, the exporter or the bank or the investor, for that inability to convert local currency into hard currency. Obviously, the key requirement there, we will need to be given possession of those local currencies, and then we'll provide indemnity, of the US dollar equivalent. Then again, the other cost of loss that we cover is war and civil disturbance, political violence. I think we all know that, the continent is very unpredictable. Recently, we've seen the resurgence of wars, civil wars, conflict, and that political instability, it doesn't really help anyone, because if it happens, it means the projects that are located in those countries, they suffer. I mean, we've got exposure in Sudan. You know, we supported a water treatment project there many years ago. We even paid a claim. We're in the process of salvaging, trying to get our money back. But obviously, because of the ongoing civil war, between the generals, so we're not even able to visit the project to see whether it's still running or not. I mean, only yesterday, we had a call where we're discussing issues around shortages of chemicals. The project is going to run out of chlorine that's required to treat the water into potable water. Then, one of the things that we also cover is breach of contract. Obviously, this cover is very important where projects are structured on a concession basis or PPAs, power purchase agreement, where the utilities are the counterparties, they have to pay, for the services that are being provided. So again, if government were to renege on these obligations, then obviously ECIC will have to chip in, and make the exporter, the contractor, the bank, or the investor good for the loss that is suffered due to breach of contract. And then the other two cover that I've highlighted in light orange, this is where we provide sovereign, cover. We provide insurance cover to sovereign. So I'll call it sovereign cover for now. And then it's breach of sovereign financial obligations. This is where you get your Minister of Finance being the counterparty to a loan agreement. Again, borrowing to support infrastructure projects. Obviously, if the MOF is not able to meet its payment obligations, then ECIC again chips in, to make good on the loan that's not being repaid to the bank. Then the last one, we've got protected default or non-payment. Again, this is just payment that cannot be made, not because there's a dispute, but probably because the sovereign doesn't have money. So obviously, we will be there to make good, in terms of our insurance cover. Then the other segment of the risk that we cover, commercial risk. Here again, we cover insolvency, which is very key. If some of these entities that are incorporated or that are established in the signatory countries, running those specific projects, if they run into headwinds, end up being liquidated, again, ECIC will chip in and make good for the loan that we've covered. And then the last one will be protected default on the commercial side of things. Again, if the borrower does not pay the loan, not because there's a dispute, but because maybe the fundamentals of the project do not stick up anymore. It could be a change in the market, especially for commodity products, where the prices, just, fluctuates to unsustainable levels. So again, ECIC will chip in there. Then the other risks is non-performance. These are related to bonds, products that we provide, especially our performance bond and advance payment bond. So those will be triggered by non-performance, failure to deliver, on the project. So obviously, we will chip in there and make good the bank that has provided liquidity through the bonds. Then why do we do this? We always have a vested interest because our role is to promote exports of goods and services. So we do have some content requirements that we insist on, and this is in pursuit of our DTS's industrial and localization policy. Obviously, if we manufacture and export more, we grow the economy. There are other spin-offs in terms of fiscal revenue that flows. Job creation, I think, is very key. It cannot be emphasized. Then the content requirements that we require, they're twofold. For export credit loans, obviously we insist on 70 SA content requirements being met, meaning that the procurement of goods and services have to emanate from South Africa, and then we allow for the 30% to be procured elsewhere. Then the second category is projects that happen on the continent. Here we've made an accommodation because we also realize that, many countries, they're not aware of, of the economic challenges. They've come up with their own sourcing requirements, localization requirements. So we needed to be very much alive to those possibilities. So for African projects that happen anywhere on the African continent, we insist on 70%, but that 70% is split into two. 50% of goods and services needs to be from South Africa. And then the 20% can be from the host country or anywhere on the African continent. And then again, we measure these percentages, on the loan amount that is supported or on the export contract price, that we support. There is a set definition of what constitutes content. We always have lots of debate and discussions around that, especially given the fact that, we have lost some competitiveness as a country. So it's becoming a big challenge in terms of where the sourcing comes from, But for us, it's very important that when we provide our cover, we need to make sure that as a country we benefit. Because at the end of the day, we are putting the balance sheet of government on the table. So there has to be benefits for that. Just some facts around the claims that we've paid. And this is the core of the business. Obviously, we are there to pay claims. We do not run away. We do not look for the fine prints to avoid paying claims. We do settle our claims. So this slide, it just gives you a snapshot of some of the claims that we've settled. And some of them we're still in the process of salvaging. And if you look at most of them, these are infrastructure projects. The first one was a waste treatment plant that was supposed to be built in China. And a very interesting on this project, the plant was designed, manufactured offshore, and delivered to China. It was stuck at the harbor. And what happened there was that the design plans were shared with the Chinese. And they looked at them and realized that they can do this on their own. And they decided to renege on the project. So that plant, it just became old, but it couldn't be delivered. And we ended up paying a claim. Then the second project, it was an aquaculture project, prawns farm that we tried to build in Suriname, And we ended up paying a claim there because of desalination issues. And the species that wanted to be grown there, it couldn't survive the desalination content there. So we paid a claim. Then the third one, it was a mining project in Kazakhstan, a gold mine. So we looked at the feasibility studies, the reserve reports. We're quite comfortable that there will be sufficient mineral resources that will be mined, gold, that will be processed and sold and repay the loan. Unfortunately, when the project started mining, they found other byproducts instead of gold. They got uranium, copper, cobalt, and other stuff. And luckily there, we sold the project to another company that had interest on the byproducts. And then we were able to salvage, the full amount of the loan that we paid. So I think that was a very successful one. So we were able to salvage the claimed amount. You can see there it was a lot of money, almost $30 million. And then the other project that we also paid a claim on, it's a marine operation vessel. This vessel is used by the oil companies for monitoring, security surveillance. And it was built by a South African company, in Durban. And the boat worked very well for years. It was on hire. The company made a couple of bucks in the beginning. But later on, due to the oil price dropping, the vessel was no longer used as often as one would have intended. And we ended up paying a claim there of about $3.7 million. And we are still salvaging currently. Then the other claim that we paid, this was a banana plantation in Mozambique. It was infested by the Panama disease. When we looked at the project, everybody was very excited. Chiquita project and bananas, And we're looking forward to this because we did a pilot project which showed some very good production. And then when the project, started being implemented on a big basis, then the unfortunate thing happened. The Panama's disease infected the farm. There were a lot of measures that were put in place, to contain the disease. We were even assisted by the University of Pretoria, some professor who was very knowledgeable with some of this agricultural, disease. He was involved. He advised us, on different options. We ended up going for cultivars that were, non-resistant to the disease. On a pilot basis, it worked very well, but on a bigger basis, unfortunately, the disease resuscitated because it was still in the soil. So we ended up paying a claim there, and we couldn't salvage. And then we sold the farm for a sum. Then the last claim that we paid, it was about $56 million. This was a diamond, in fact, it's a diamond band project in Lesotho. It's still operating to date. And at the time when we settled the claim, we had to look at how can we salvage the mine, because we were interested in the salvage process. And the big challenge there, the project had experienced, reserve shortages. There were no diamonds to be found. They were getting smaller stones. And this business turns on big finds. If you get some of these big stones, once in a while, then at least you've got sufficient revenue to service the loan obligations. So again, we paid the claim, we restructured the project, we even lent more money because we wanted the project to succeed. They've done further drilling studies, the results are promising, and we're also looking good in terms of salvages going forward. I mean, in the last 2 years, we have received some payments. So that's a good success story. And again, we work very closely with engineers, both from a civil perspective as well as from the resource classification and monitoring of this project on an ongoing basis. So this slide just shows you some of the projects that we've got. This classification is according to the Pen Union. Don't be bothered by some of the repeats that you see here. You can see the biggest exposure that we have to date is in the power sector. And there are 3 projects there that we're exposed to. We've got 2 gas power plants, in Mozambique. These are offshoot projects from the Sasol pipeline that we're supported. And then we also have a combined cycle project in Ghana, SunPower. I'm sure some of the people in this room that I met before this session, we exchanged notes on this. They are very familiar with this project. It's a combined cycle project. Every time I speak about this, my heart melts, not because it's a successful project, because this is the project that led Group 5 to its dismiss. So the bonds were called, not because they didn't perform, they delivered the fiscal infrastructure very well. But again, the big challenge was dealing with the technical aspect of the project, especially the combined cycle. The plant uses both your heavy fuels as well as gas. So those are being used interchangeably currently, but the long-term view was to transition the plant to use gas away from heavy fuels. Again, we are looking at Ghana in terms of the fiscal challenges that they have, If they are able to manage those, obviously, we may not face a claim in terms of this project. Then in terms of construction, civil engineering structures, some of the projects that we did, road project in Swaziland, and then also Global Innovative Consulting, they were doing some of the stormwater drainage in Ghana. Then we've got the Zimbabwe project. I'm sure Engineer Marau is very familiar with this one. It's one of the projects that we support, one that I'm very, very proud of. I'll talk more about it and what are the success stories around it. Then we also supported some of the hospital projects in Ghana, Valmed Hospital in Angola, and then some of the furniture project that I was talking about in terms of the DTIC's master plans. You can see them shop fitting. This was a project involving Stanbic, in Nigeria. They wanted some furniture to keep their offices and some of the branches. They are on a rollout program in Nigeria. Then the toll road in Zimbabwe, Infralink, this we did many years ago, again with Group 5. It had a lot of challenges due to the economic meltdown in Zimbabwe. I know we change currencies every now and then, but I'm very proud about this project because, you know, when the bank was saying we wanted to claim, and then we said, hey, you cannot claim because this project is very integral. And at the time, we were already involved in the discussions on Zim borders. So we knew that the long-term, you know, survival of this project is also dependent on Zim borders. So to date, you know, the repayment of the loan, you know, has been going very well. I mean, our exposure has reduced from $202,000 to about $70 to date. And had we paid a claim, that meant that we would have sent Zimbabwe to the guillotines because the credit standing would have gone down. Nobody would have been able to touch Zimbabwe. And I think we did it for that reason, to turn the tide, you know, to allow Zimbabwe to be an investment destination. And we did it. And then the other project that we supported, Malawi, Vodacom Ethiopia is the recent one. And, you know, very interestingly, this project is about the rollout of the mobile infrastructure, base stations, switches, and all of that. It's a joint venture between, you know, Vodacom and Safaricom. And this project is doing very well currently. We haven't gotten any reports. And the most amazing thing that happened, when we closed this transaction, the wearing parties came to South Africa to reach a peace deal. And obviously now we're monitoring the transition, you know, to see how is it going, whether there will be internal peace. And I think that's what we're looking forward to. Then I've spoken about the Diamond project. I'm not going to look at that. On transportation storage, we've got a couple of transportation projects in East Africa, Tanzania, Zambia. These are small projects. I'm not going to bother you with. Some of the exposures that we have on the continent, you can see Ghana looms large. I think it was the flavor of the month for the longest time, so we concentrated very heavily because there's a lot of interest, business interest between South Africa and Ghana. And then the second exposure that you see is Zimbabwe, sitting at 26.72, Ethiopia at 7.26, Mozambique, you know, at 7.22, Angola 3.15, and then the smallest one you can see there, you know, is Tanzania at 0.37. 0.37. Now, what are the opportunities that we see on the continent? You know, the continent has got an infrastructure deficit. I mean, that's a well-known fact. It has been talked about at many conferences. So for ECIC, we are seeing a lot of inquiries from Angola. You know, one of the big projects that we're looking at is the Lobito Rail Corridor. You know, and this project involves two countries, you know, all the way from the east coast, west coast of Angola to the DRC mining region of Kolwezi. So obviously, if that corridor materializes, you know, it's going to provide a very good logistic, you know, corridor that will transport minerals and other agricultural projects. We're also looking at the expansion of the port terminal in Maputo, you know, to increase the capacity of that terminal. Currently, it handles coal and other commodities. So we're just waiting for the feasibility study to be finalized, and then we'll hit the ground running. Then again, in Zimbabwe, there is a project that we're looking at, you know, to build healthcare facilities. I think about 22 hospitals. Some of them are district hospitals. Some will be daycare facilities. That will provide both maternal and pediatric services. So we are already in negotiations. Hopefully we'll close this one very quickly, Mr. Warau. And we're also seeing, okay, there is a water treatment plant. This is a big one. It's about $1 billion project. So Angola needs potable water. And this project is still in the early phases. You know, companies have bidded for it. There is a company that was successful that we're engaging with. And obviously, the key thing that we're looking here is some of the processing equipment, you know, that comes from South Africa. And then the resurgence of mining activities, which is very key, especially in Tanzania. You know, we've got a number of inquiries and projects that we're looking at. And obviously here, we're still addressing the bankability issues, feasibility studies, looking at the reserves, you know, and the funding that's required. So hopefully in the next 6 to 8 months, we'll see some progress there. And then also in Zimbabwe, we've got a plant Naman that's looking to expand. It's already operating on a small scale basis. And again, there, we're still addressing the feasibility issues around the reserves. There's also opportunities for renewable and green economy. I think solar power is the in thing. I think the only issue that we have is that there's a lot of imports that are coming from China. So we definitely need to build, you know, manufacturing capability locally. There is some, but it's not sufficient to meet the current demands. So obviously there's a big opportunity for South African companies to really up their game here to meet the demands, even if they cannot address it completely. But at least we need to get the majority of this. And then technological advances. There are some places where we've been looking at projects involving, you know, data centers to manage data, you know, some cases systems, you know, to improve efficiencies. And then climate change. It has been cited as the biggest risk globally, but we see this as an opportunity because it gives us an opportunity to rethink how can we support projects that are climate friendly. You know, the technologies are there, you know, they just need to be tested. And then the use of fossils, you know, versus, you know, lithium battery storages, hydrogen, LNGs, and other clean energy technologies. And by the way, as ECIC, we are involved in Mozambique, the Moz LNG project. It's about $16 billion project. So that project was interrupted by the insurgencies. You know, that happened in north of Mozambique. But that problem seems to have been handled now. The project is likely to resume very soon. We are in discussions. So this will provide a lot of opportunity for South African exporters. And in fact, there's a lot of companies that have been involved in the R-front works and in setting up some of the infrastructure that was required, you know, for doing the R-front works. Again, the ESG and sustainable development issues, these are very important to address. Obviously, we want to support projects that comply with ESG, that prioritize ESG, you know, as a key issue to be addressed. Again, the big opportunity that we see is the AfCFTA. I think it has created the biggest single market, but obviously there are concerns around implementation issues, lack of momentum. But there's been a lot of engagements, lots of talk around it, and we see this as a very good opportunity to promote intertrade on the continent. We are not trading enough, you know, especially in the SADC we're doing something, but we need to trade with one another all over the continent. Again, the demographic dividend plays a big role. You can see the population growth of 1.2 billion, and this is projected to grow even higher. And the majority of that population will be composed of youth that are likely to become engineers. So as the engineering community, I think there's a definite need to really bring the youth into this fold so that, you know, the sector can survive, you know, for the longest time. And then just sharing some of the key projects. I did talk about Zimbabwe project. This is one of the biggest PPP projects that we've done, you know, in this SADC. And very interestingly, you know, we did this project on the side of the Zimbabwean, not on the South African side. So when you get to the border, you'll be very impressed because of the differences that you see on the opposite side. You will wish the project would have been on the other side of the border. Unfortunately, the Zimbabweans have done well there. So it's a 17.5-year concession. You know, the contract was awarded to Rubex, a South African company. They did the improvements. They're also managing it over the time. You know, we have ring-fenced the revenues, and you know, there's been a lot of efficiencies that has been introduced, both in terms of clearing the vehicles, you know, that transit the border, as well as in terms of collection. So they're using technology, they're leveraging on it to improve efficiency. So this is one of the successful stories. And, as ECRC, we played a very meaningful role there. We're the only ECA, together with other private insurers. The loan that we covered is about 136 million, and that is a combination of equity and debt that was provided. But the total project was about 260 million. And currently, you can see the stats here at the end. They're processing about 950 trucks daily. I just took one segment, but there's a lot of vehicles that are moving across. And 4,000 travelers on a daily basis. So that's quite a lot of improvement in terms of that border. Then the other project that we supported is the Nacala Rail Corridor project. We did this project together with Mitsui and Vale, Brazil. Also a project finance, that the distance that was covered by the new track, about 912 kilometers. So this was a dedicated facility to transport coal from Wati's mine to the port of Nacala, which is a naturally deep sea water port. It doesn't need dredging. And the corridor does provide a lot of opportunities to link up Zimbabwe and Zambia. So they can use that, to transport their produce as well. It's got a capacity of almost 22 million tons per annum. So about 18 million tons was reserved for coal. And the difference, that's where general cargo can take advantage of. There's also a passenger rail from Malawi, which was an offshoot project that we supported there. Again, facilitating the movement of people between Mozambique and Malawi. Then, what are some of the, SunPower, I think I did touch on this, in Ghana. This was a very challenging project. Like I said, always when I talk about it, my heart melts because it precipitated the downfall of Group 5. And we used to do a lot of business with them on the continent. So that project has been going very well currently. There are challenges in terms of the repayment because the utility can't afford to pay the tariff. So we've been in discussions trying to restructure it, and obviously the country has also, fiscal challenges. They've gone to the Paris Club seeking for debt forgiveness. But with this one, we're trying to take it out of that realm. So hopefully we'll be successful, and then it will be a success story to talk about. Then the key financing, considerations that we take into account into this project. Obviously, it's very important that these projects are conducted in a conducive investment climate. And what I mean by that is that we need political stability to be able to support infrastructure projects. And we also need legal certainty around ownership, security rights, whether if the project goes belly up, can the lenders enforce the security, salvage, can they sell it? That's very important because as an insurance company, if we do pay claims, we expect to salvage. And there are many ways of salvaging. So obviously, we need to be comfortable around this. And again, the partnership between the public sector and the private sector is very important. Without the private sector, I don't think governments can deliver on infrastructure projects on their own. We are seeing that locally, and obviously also on the continent. So the engineering sector plays a very key role again here in terms of designing projects that last for long. The financing is also a very key challenge. Obviously, the syndication is very important. We need long-term financing from DFIs, commercial banks, to finance the infrastructure projects. Again, the other issue that we need to look at, repayment ability, that goes into the heart of, project viability. Are these projects economically viable? Can they sustain themselves on their own, even if they were to use take-or-pay or user-pay systems? That's what we look at. So a lot of due diligence goes into the studies that are done. If it's a port of entry like Zimbora's, we'll have to do the study on the traffic that goes in and out, and look at the various segments and make sure that the tariff that is set, allows for the project to be able to service the debt obligations. And also to give a return to the investors. That's very important. Then the sponsor support versus sovereign guarantees. Some of these projects are conducted on the back of, MF guarantees. We've seen with our own How Train project, without Treasury's involvement in terms of providing guarantees and the funding that's required, that project wouldn't have happened. Then you also have independent projects that happen on the back of the sponsor support. For example, the Zimbabweans. The government of Zimbabwe just outsourced the management. So they didn't provide funding, but the project is sustainable on its own. The sponsors have put their balance sheets on the table to anchor the project. Then again, the credit enhancement. And this is where ECIC plays a significant role. And our role should be valued very highly, because we make it possible for projects to happen on the continent. Projects are able to lay off the risks. Banks are also able to lay off the risks and get, capital, the correct capital provisioning on the back of our cover. So the insurance that we provide is very key. Then the last issue will be projects need to address climate change issues as well as ESG issues. So we insist upon this, obviously depending on the categorization of the project, whether it's A, B, or C, we will look into the Equator principles, how they apply, what are the management plans that need to be put in place, and we monitor on an ongoing basis the compliance with the management plans. This is my last slide. The chair has already indicated to me I've got 5 minutes. So if you really want to have a conversation with us, these are our contact details. We've just moved offices, from our old office in Highveld. We are now situated still in Highveld, but in Bellsbridge, Boulevard Office Park. That's where we are. You can also go onto our website to see the products that we provide, and also some of the information relating to some of the projects that we're supporting. And then our telephone number 012-471-3713-800. So if you do get an opportunity, you can call us. Let's have the conversation and see how we can assist you, both in terms of winning projects on the continent, to provide your services, engineering services, and to deliver on those projects. We've got a network of financiers that we work with, and then we're able to come up with tailor-made financing to suit any particular project. And then we overlay that with our insurance, so that you have sleepless nights and you're not worrying about the risk of expropriation or the risk of insolvency. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing with us what the ECIC does. And I think you reminded us again that engineering is a risky career. I just wonder those people who call themselves engineers without studying engineering or without being registered, if they knew how risky it was, they would probably be calling themselves doctors instead. And again, COVID has taught us that despite all that we can plan, and we believe that anything can be solved by an equation and some super high-speed computers. But I think that even just from our session we had on Monday, where we went through case studies of mobility of African engineers, the speakers shared of the risk that is inherent in doing projects. And thank you for reminding us that life is, risk is part of life, and that the insurance industry is part of really the ecosystem that enables us. And again, your slide on the economic sector settles the superiority debate of civil or electrical. we are all risky. You know, that's the end of that. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we have a very short day, so we're not going to have even time for questions, and our speakers are also going to be keeping things short. But after the session, please feel free to engage them as we enjoy some refreshments in the foyer. Our next speaker is from ADEA, that's the Association for the Development of Education in Africa. He is a Senior Programs Officer. Please let's welcome Mr. Shem Bodogore to the stage.
Thank you, Program Director. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are happy to be part of this journey. As ADEA, we are a regional organization. We cover the entire continent of Africa on matters education. We believe that we are a critical voice of education in Africa. We believe that we are a body that helps to champion quality education in Africa, of course working with other partners. We support the African Union because the African Union continental frameworks is what we align with. We started this with the first education plan of action, and then we went to the second decade plan of action, 2006 to 2015. And now we are supporting the Continental Education Strategy for Africa, which I know my colleague will talk about. In terms of really our vision, I'm hoping, this is the upper one, the down one. Yes. We believe that we have convening power because we link up a lot with governments, especially ministries of education, in order to set the education agenda. Our vision is really to see an education and training system in the continent that can promote really the acquisition of skills, acquisition of knowledge, acquisition of attitudes and values. And that's really what our mission also drives. And we believe totally in empowerment. Unless we empower ourselves as African governments, it will be difficult to sustain the transformation of education that we are trying to do. And we will probably be singing mostly to other tunes apart from our own. I think yesterday we were reminded by the Minister in charge of electricity in the President's office that unless we organize ourselves, we shall be organized. We shall be super organized. So we strongly believe in empowering African countries to be able to reform their education systems in a sustainable manner, in a way that contributes to the development of the continent. So that is really just a slide about, who we are, our mission, our vision. We have, in terms of our structures, we have a board, and this board comprises ministers of education of Africa, as well as development partners. The African Union is a member of that board. And what is interesting is that the Bureau of African Ministers of Education of the African Union is also the ADEA Bureau. This was a decision made at the African Union level. So you can see how much we are tied with the African Union. In ADEA, we normally say that our existence depends on African countries. If the member states say that we are no longer relevant, we shall close. And so we listen to the needs of African countries. We have structures. We have a secretariat in Abidjan, in Ivory Coast, but we also have a presence in different countries. We have what we call inter-country quality nodes. These are thematic groups of countries that come together to share ideas of solving common challenges around education. And the unique thing about this structure is that they are led by countries. Previously, we had working groups that were led by partners, and then African ministers said, no, we want to take the lead. So we have inter-country quality nodes running from early childhood education, which is domiciled in Mauritius, all the way to higher education, which is domiciled in Senegal. And through these inter-country quality nodes, we are then able to gauge what is happening on the ground in terms of the countries, challenges of education, and how some of the countries are using some of the innovations to be able to solve those challenges. And therefore, they are platforms for peer learning and knowledge exchange. At the same time, we are covering our work around two pillars: the Continental Education Platform pillar, where we engage really at the continental and regional level in matters education, issues of knowledge generation. We have a knowledge hub. But at the same time, we are also looking inwards into the countries to work with the countries to develop tools and packages so that they can be able to, reform their education systems. We have a partnership ecosystem with us, and currently we have African Union, of course, leading, and then we have ministries of education of the continent, and also the Islamic Development Bank, the Lego Foundation, the African Development Bank, GPE, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the MasterCard Foundation, one of the long ones, and USAID. So through these partnerships, we are then able to work with countries to progress education transformation. So for this particular conference, because I would like to narrow down my presentation in line with the particular conference, one of the areas that we are supporting is STEM: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And we have done a lot of work in terms of supporting, building the capacity of teachers at primary and secondary levels. And now we are also moving further down, embracing play-based STEM education. But then, what is triggering this support in terms of what ADEA is doing? We have done some research, some studies, but also interrogated research and studies from other areas and engaged with countries and other education actors. And we find that the STEM policies that are existing are weak. They are either weak in terms of the integrated nature of STEM, or they are weak in certain components of STEM. And then we also have countries where actually STEM education policies do not exist. So that means something has to be done about it. At the same time, and I think as has been pointed out since I've been here for the last 2 days, there's a lot of focus on science, mathematics, and then technology as an enabler. But you find that in the lower levels of education, the E is mostly a silent member of this family. There are countries that have really customized, adapted, and brought engineering to the doorstep of learners, but in many countries this is not really happening. And therefore we find that this particular discourse is very important in trying to address that. There's also low uptake of STEM subjects, especially in basic education. And when you look at the enrollments on STEM subjects for girls and women, we still have a bit to do to move the needle. There are also the perennial mismatch of skills in terms of the skills that the education system is applying and that which the labor market requires. And it does not help that the needs of the labor market also keeps changing, because even as technology advances, the needs also change. And so one of the challenges that we need to address is how to reduce or eliminate this mismatch in skills provision. And then the issue of data has been coming up since Monday, not only in terms of information lacking in the engineering field, but also even in other areas. You only need to look at the reports. If you look at the Global Education Monitoring Report, and if you look at the continental reports, there are certain areas where you just find blanks, especially for Africa. So this is a major issue that we are trying to address. How can we get decision makers to use quality data on education and skills. So that is also one of the reasons that is triggering our support. And finally, COVID made us realize the importance of technology. Yes, we used to say technology is important, but when COVID hit home and we could no longer walk to our schools, then we realized that one way of engaging learners and teachers was through technology. But at the same time, many of our learners missed out because of issues of electricity, issues of infrastructure, the high-end technology devices that were being used. So we need to see how to manage this sword called technology, especially in education, because there's one side that cuts deep in terms of improving, access, but there's the other side which is leaving a lot of our learners. So this is an issue that also needs to be addressed, and I know engineering can play a role in that. So what are we doing as ADEA in terms of this? Well, we continue to generate evidence. And generate evidence that can help address some of these issues. We have done situation analysis around STEM education at the primary and secondary levels in 10 countries, with interesting results that cover issues of policy all the way to curriculum. And at the moment, we are developing the strategic framework for the inter-country quality node that is based in Kenya that is dealing with this issue at Semastea. And we believe that this group can really work together with us as ADEA, but through that inter-country quality node, as well as the one around higher education and scientific research, and the one on TVET. So that is one study that we did, and it had results that we are trying to pursue in terms of implementing the recommendations. As I mentioned, we are also now embracing play-based learning of STEM, and we are working with the LEGO Foundation around this. We have just developed a STEM toolkit. If you see under there, the development of tools. Then we recently undertook a study on the level of preparedness of countries in introducing vocational subjects in secondary education. Because in terms of career progression, we find that it is important to introduce some of these subjects so that it can help the learners when they exit secondary education to make decisions on what kind of careers they want to make, whether they want to go the academic route or whether they want to go the vocational route, or even for those who find themselves in the labor market, they need to have some level of skills. So that's also a study that we did in 5 countries. At the same time, the issue of resources is important. Technical and vocational skills development has been termed to be a resource-hungry subsector. So, and of course, we know that there's limited resources within government, and also, of course, even the partners. The tap is not open forever. So how can we look for alternative financing models for this particular subsector? So that's also one of the studies we did. We have a major study covering the West African Economic and Monetary Union, WAEMU. This is in terms of matching vocational skills in what is being supplied and what is demanded by the labor market, as I mentioned. So this is an ongoing project. And then we did, in 2020, a mapping study of the landscape in higher education and scientific research. And this informed the work that we are doing going forward for that particular subsector. And after the COVID-19, we undertook a major study supported by the Islamic Development Bank and the African Development Bank and the MasterCard Foundation, looking at the use of ICT in education during crisis. We covered 35 African countries, and the results show you that the needs are quite varied. There are countries where even the basic issues of electricity remain a challenge. And then you also have countries that have moved quite a bit where they are now looking at high-end use of ICT. And the interesting thing about this is that we actually held a side meeting with the country experts or representatives when we were launching this project in Senegal. And the discourse that we had and the outcome of that in terms of their priority areas very much aligned to what came out in the recommendations. So we don't just stop at undertaking studies. Based on the outcome of the studies, the findings and the recommendations, we do develop tools and knowledge products that now we use to engage with policymakers on how they can take up some of those recommendations and integrate them into their national education sector plans. And so we've done quite a number of those. In terms of tools, after COVID, after engaging with the countries, one of the things we found out is that, especially for the education sector, we are not prepared for disasters. We are not prepared for disasters in the sense that it is difficult to continue learning in the absence of physical classrooms. And so one of the missing links was having a norm and standard, some kind of norms and standards that can enable countries to gauge where they are in terms of providing hybrid learning that uses both ICT technology, but also face-to-face. Because a COVID-like crisis will probably still come up. But this time we need to be ready. We should not be caught flat-footed. So what we have done together with the countries is to develop what we call the remote education benchmarking toolkits, covering basic education, technical vocational skills development, as well as higher education. South Africa led the one on basic education, the one on Tibet was led by Mauritius, and the one on higher education by Senegal. So these toolkits are now being refined and will be given to the countries to help gauge themselves. At the same time, we have frameworks on monitoring and evaluation of STEM, and I've talked about the STEM toolkit. We often develop policy briefs and also blogs. Then, in line with the first pillar that I talked about, we convene high-level meetings, apart from technical meetings. We bring ministers together in the room with partners to discuss, not only among themselves, but also with partners on those key issues on education that is affecting our continent. So we normally have annual high-level policy dialogue forums. We have one which is coming up at the end of October in Lusaka, focusing on foundational learning. I don't know what else happened. Let me see. How do I get out of this? Chair.
Sorry, for the AV team, can we please just close the Teams window on the monitor in the front? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So yes, we have a high-level policy dialogue forum around foundational learning in Lusaka. Last year, we had a triennial. After COVID-19, we looked at how to move forward in building resilience for the education sector. At the same time, we also have technical meetings within our inter-country quality nodes. So looking ahead, we are currently developing our strategic plan for 2023-2027, and it's going to cover 4 core areas, looking at foundational learning, which covers literacy, numeracy, and social and emotional learning. At the same time, we are looking at how to rethink technical and vocational skills development and secondary education in light of what I've just talked about. The higher education and scientific research subsector requires a bit of reimagining because, as you know and as has been said before, we need research that helps us to solve African problems. We need to see, even when we are engaging with the outside world, the whole issue of mutuality. How do we address that? And how do we increase even the threshold of our publication? So these are some of the areas that we are going to look at. And then also improving education system resilience, as I mentioned. And here we have several areas. The issue of data, on education and skills, leveraging EdTech, and then improving access, equity, and inclusion, especially when you look at the vulnerable groups. As probably some of you already know, 2024 is the Year of Education for Africa. My sister will probably talk about that. And so one of the things we are doing is we are supporting the African Union in that. So I think I'll skip this. It's just details of the key activities. But now, as we come closer home now, what have we had? We have been here for the last 2 days, since Monday, so this is the third day. And through the discourses that, we have had several things that come to mind as key takeaways, especially for ADEA. And first is the lack of disaggregated and reliable data on education engineering or engineering education. And we believe that this is critical. You cannot really monitor what you cannot measure. And you need to fly when you can see and not to fly blind. I think there was a famous saying that if you want to go far, go with people. If you want to go fast, go alone. Now, you need data if you want to go with people and you want to go far. So this is a critical area, and I dare say that we are not only looking at disaggregated and reliable, we are looking at quality data with all its dimensions. The second area is the issue of skills mobility, skills retention, interregional recognition of qualifications and certifications, the whole area of harmonization of policies and standards. This is also something that we had as an issue. The third one, fostering education and capacity building. I think a lot has been talked about in terms of continuing professional development of engineers, empowering young engineers, having engineers that are ethical, having engineers can actually be held accountable, because empowerment means having the right knowledge, it means being present, and it means being engaged. I think yesterday we had a presentation around gender, and it's not just a question of numbers. It's a question of engaging with those numbers. So the issue of having young engineers that are accountable, ethical, and committed is key. And I think there was the issue of professional mentoring as an area that requires some work. Then impactful awareness and visibility of engineering. The engineers need to be at the table and not in the menu. I think this came from the minister. And I found this to be very interesting because it really talks about empowerment. Then building the partnership ecosystem. In order to make progress, I think we need to work together. We need to have practical and mutually benefiting partnerships and collaborations. And across the ecosystem, it's not government alone. We need to have government, the academia, private sector, industry, even development partners, regional continental bodies such as us and the African Union. And that talks to what I will say in my last slide about having a think tank. We need to have a think tank to distill all these issues to help us move forward. And finally, one of the things we heard about is exploring those specific and more compelling ways of cultivating excellence in the field of engineering and getting engineers to be at the table in policy making. I think this is important because it is one way of influencing. And that is why, much as we have this discourse, we need to have more engagements with governments, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who define policy, they're the ones who define the strategies, and then we can support them in the implementation. So that discourse needs to happen. So what is our promise as ADEA? Well, in the spirit of smart partnerships, we support the establishment and operationalization of the engineering education think tank. We believe that this think tank is crucial if we are to move the agenda which is being set forward in this forum. Last year, during our triennial, this issue of think tank was echoed by none other than the Minister for Science, Technology and Innovation of Uganda. And I will refer you to a quote about that. And so I think this is a great moment. It's a momentous occasion where we can actually start that journey. In that meeting of last year, the Vice Prime Minister and the Minister of Education of Mauritius actually committed that Mauritius is ready to host a think tank around technical and vocational skills development. So we believe that we can work together with these two think tanks. So that is our promise, the first one. The second one is that we are happy for this fraternity to leverage the structures that we have in place, the platforms that we have in place, in terms of our ICQNs, in terms of our policy dialogue forums, to be able to push the agenda, to be able to build the capacity of engineers, and also to advocate for the formulation or improvement of policies that leverage technology to build capacity in engineering education. So that is our second promise. The third promise is to support other proposed activities or focus areas that this forum will come out with. We heard about the issue of having data on engineers, a profile or a register of engineers. What are they doing? How can we tap into your expertise? How can we get that information easily? And how can we update that information? So we are happy for that. And I know there was also the issue of creating an African Accord. So that is, again, something that we are happy to support through our networks and through our platforms. Finally, I just want to leave you with these two quotations, which to me were quite compelling and really stood out. The first one was said yesterday, I think by the minister in charge of electricity in this country. And he said, as long as we are disjointed, and I've added there as Africans, we are going to be super exploited. So we must define our own standards. That does not mean that we are lowering our standards, but we want the standards that is addressing our needs, that is contextualized. And I thought this was really important because it talks about empowerment. The second statement about empowerment comes from the Honorable Minister from Uganda, as I mentioned, and she said that Africa must think and stop delegating thinking to others. As a continent, we need to think ourselves and not delegate the thinking. So we need to rededicate ourselves to growing a new system that addresses our own challenges. So for me, these were really telling because they are really words of empowerment, and it can encourage us, even as a forum, to move forward knowing that if we do that, then we are empowering ourselves and the continent at large, and we are definitely going to succeed because, as I think the first speaker said, we are going to be the youngest, the continent with the youngest population for the next 25 plus years. What are we going to do with that dividend? I think that is a question we need to ask ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that insightful presentation. And you have highlighted the silence in the E, particularly in the early stages of education. And it's quite sad that you mentioned that, because that is when you can captivate the minds of children before they start being exposed to other things. And I take a story from when my son was a lot younger, and he said, Daddy, what do you actually do? You know, these kids who are always on YouTube now, you must be able to articulate what you do. Another time I was working for ESCOM. I said, no, we work on power stations and we make electricity. I was like, wow, so how do you actually make electricity? And fortunately, when we're driving, we see pylons and substations and all of that, right? And when he then went to graduate from preschool, they asked him, what do you want to be when you grow up? In my mind, I thought he was going to say an electrical engineer. And he says, I want to be a construction engineer. So the civil engineers win again. But we will take that challenge. We will take that challenge. The next speaker is our colleague from the AU. She is the head of Education Division under the Education and Science Department at the AU. Can we please put our eyes together for Ms. Sophia Demutila Ashpala.
Thank you very much, Director of Proceedings, for according me this opportunity. And I stand on the protocol that you earlier established. Indeed, it's an honor for me to be here as I give a statement on behalf of the African Union Commission during this 9th African Engineering Week and 7th Engineering Conference. As the African Union, we believe quality education is fundamental to Africa's socio-economic development. In a continent with diverse cultures, languages, and challenges, a strong educational foundation is crucial for addressing emerging and pressing issues and fostering sustainable growth. Our overarching continental AU Agenda 2063 lays emphasis on science, technology, and innovation as critical tools for achieving continental development goals. Agenda 2063 talks of an education and skill revolution underpinned by science, technology, and innovation to develop Africa's human and social capital and to promote well-educated citizens. Young African men and women are recognized as path breakers of the African Knowledge Society, contributing significantly to innovation and entrepreneurship. Equally, the Sustainable Development Goals, notably those under Goal 4, that seek to ensure inclusive, equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning, opportunity for all, as well as those under Goal 8 that calls for inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. The African Union has put up in place key strategies, including the Science, Technology, and Innovation Strategy for Africa, the Continental Education Strategy for Africa, that is what Adia was referring to. They are one of our implementing partners for CESA, the Technical and Vocational Education Strategy, and the Digital Education Strategy for Africa. We are also in the process of developing the African Continental Qualification Framework to, among others, enhance compatibility and transparency of qualification from all subsectors and levels of education and training, and improve mobility of learners and workers across the continent. These are instruments underscore concrete commitments to effectively address the emerging issues at the intersection of technology, innovation, and policy, and ultimately the transformation of Africa. When implemented, Africa shall be transformed in the knowledge-based and innovation-led continent with attractive economic growth rates and high returns on investments. Additionally, as Africa is the center of technological revolution that is fundamentally altering our societies, focus on STEM is crucial for the transformation into the knowledge-based and innovation-led continent. Africa has to be deliberate in growing a generation of mathematicians, as this is vital in achieving the fourth industrial revolution with a thriving science, technology, innovation, and mathematics, or the STEM workforce. Considering the agency to transform and revitalize the entire education system on the continent, including TVET system, the African Union has adopted education as a theme of the year for 2024. Having education as a theme of the year is a significant step toward placing education at the center of African development agenda and shine a continental spotlight on building resilient systems for increased access to inclusive, quality, and relevant education in Africa. In collaboration with our partners, we are in the process of developing a roadmap on the theme that shall elaborate concrete and impactful activities and initiatives at national, regional, and continental levels, and help catalyze skills revolution that will drive economic development in Africa as called for in Agenda 2063. Let us all recognize then the power of collaboration and partnership in realizing the AU Agenda 2063, and together we can make our vision of a prosperous and inclusive Africa a reality. Thank you all for your dedication and commitment to the engineering excellence. Thank you.
Ms. Sophia, thank you very much for those words, and thank you for highlighting again the importance of education as the start of the pipeline that has brought us and has given us this opportunity to be in this career that we so cherish. Maybe since the both of you talked about education, our beloved engineer Kazawadi talked about he used to be punished by being made to go plow the field, and now he does not like farming, and he can't stand vegetables. He has to eat them because they've got nutrition. You know, let's also not use those elements. Let's change that mindset around how we even approach the holistic aspects of education. I like the fact that you mentioned play as well. That is quite a notable and quite effective method of learning for our young and upcoming engineers. The next presentation will be brought across remotely, thanks to technology. We have the immediate past president of FAIO and the first female president of FAIO. Can we just give that a round of applause before we even proceed further? And the reason for that is a milestone which shows the commitments and the advancements that we're making. I would like to introduce Engineer Kalin Bouchadid, who will be presenting for us. Engineer Kalin Bouchadid, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause.
Thank you very much. Warm welcome. I will be speaking today on how FAIO can assist Africa in achieving a sustainable development goal, and talking also about what engineers can do to help in achieving these goals. I hope I can be heard. So
I think we can hear you. Maybe just the AV team. Apologies, engineer. The AV team, please just increase the volume as well. Engineer, we can hear you, but we can just see your shadow. But you look, I mean, I can see her on the screen here. So she's not just a shadow, you know, in those intelligence movies that you all watch. No, she's not hiding her secret identity. If you just can maybe have the lights on your face, it would be even better for us to be able to see as well. Thank you.
Can my screen be seen?
Yes.
I'm now sharing my screen. I hope it's up.
Yes, engineer, we can see your screen.
May I go ahead?
Please proceed.
May I go ahead?
Engineer, please proceed, if you can hear us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Good. Thank you very much. So I'm speaking today about how FAIO can assist Africa in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'll also be talking about what female engineers can do. We are all, I believe, familiar by now with the Sustainable Development Goals that were established by the United Nations. These are a set of 17 goals aimed at addressing a range of social, economic, and environmental challenges. And we believe that FAIO as an organization can play a very vital role, because even though the SDGs address several different sectors, like poverty, health, and so on, a careful analysis reveals that engineers have crucial roles to play in achieving all the SDGs. And we believe that female engineers in particular can make significant contributions in several ways. I just want to mention a little bit about FAIO. And FAIO has a vision that is to be the leading engineering professional body offering sustainable development solutions for the benefit of humankind in Africa. So FAIO's vision is properly aligned with the SDGs, and its mission is to promote and advance the science and practice of engineering for the benefit of society in Africa and globally. Now, in doing this, FAIO has 4 strategic goals: engineering advocacy, which aims to create awareness amongst leaders and policymakers and society at large of the critical importance of engineering, and education and capacity building. We aim to develop a sufficient, diverse, inclusive, and competent base of relevant engineering practitioners and industries. We aim to advance knowledge, so we'd like to promote knowledge, advancement of knowledge, especially in areas required for the development of Africa, and then disseminate such knowledge to member organizations. And then finally, as an organization, we would like to become very efficient and effective that becomes a repository of knowledge on engineering in Africa. So all these goals help us to work towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. If we take the first goal, which I said was engineering advocacy, we engage in advocacy and policy influence. FAIO can advocate for policies that prioritize sustainable development, technological innovation, and infrastructure improvement. And also, by engaging with national and regional governments, we can help shape policies that align with the SDGs and promote the role of engineering in achieving these goals. And FIO has
apologies, Engineer
consistently
Kalin.
seized the opportunity to engage African
team, can you please
governments and
assist?
other regional organizations.
Apologies, Engineer Kalin. Your slides are not moving, so it might be that you have another monitor. So maybe we can just solve that because we're still on the first slide on this side.
I see. I have. Let me just stop sharing and read. I only have one slide, one open slide. Let's just reshare it and see what happens. Okay, I've just reshared my slides. I hope you can now see a slide on capacity building and skills development.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So FIO can facilitate training programs, workshops, and conferences like what we are holding now. And all these would help to enhance the technical and professional skills of engineers. It can also serve as a platform for sharing best practices, case studies, and so on, and also looking at successful projects that address the various SDGs. And finally, FIO can support activities that promote sustainable urbanization, access to clean energy and clean water, and all these issues related to the Sustainable Development Goal. And in fact, FIO does a lot of that, supports its local and national and regional, sub-regional organizations in holding a lot of different programs, conferences, and interactions. And I've just listed a few on the side. So you see effective project management, impact of COVID on wash sector, and so on. And in addition to this, FIO has established industry sector working groups for the various industries that aim to address the issues that are related to areas like energy, transportation, water, and so on. And in this manner, FIO can disseminate, knowledge, ensure that everybody is more up to date, and so on. Now, FIO, if we come to the third goal, FIO advancing knowledge. FIO can encourage research, innovation, and so on amongst engineers so that they can develop solutions that address specific challenges related to the SDGs, such as designing resilient infrastructure, the impacts of climate change, and so on. So FIO is in a very good position to promote innovation and research. It can also support research grants. It can also encourage innovation through competitions and collaborative projects. And these are things that FIO has actually done in the past. We've held competitions on World Water Day and related to water, and we've also encouraged research through our conferences and so on.
Engineer,
And also,
apologies for interrupting again. I think the slides are
Yes.
not moving still. Can we just try something? Can you maybe put the PowerPoint into presentation mode?
it is in presentation mode at the moment.
Oh,
It's actually in presentation mode.
all right. So
If
we just have a glitch. AV team, can you please?
I'm not sure why it's.
Because we would like to just make sure that we're seeing the presentation. Maybe if we end the presentation and let's see and try and bring it up again, please.
Let me stop the presentation here.
Yes, I think you need to share your second screen. So stop sharing, and then when you share the one that's on, that PowerPoint is open full screen already. So right now you're sharing your first screen.
I have only. Let me just.
When you
I
click
only
share,
have
you're going to see two screens when you click share. So select the second screen.
Okay. I have only one. When I'm selecting, there's only one screen with the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
That's there.
And once your PowerPoint starts going, do you see the presentation view where you can see your notes?
Yes, I can see the presentation view.
Oh, okay. I think maybe then let's duplicate your PowerPoint. So go on to PowerPoint and then disable presenter view.
Let me go to PowerPoint. I'm actually on presentation views. I'm on a normal view at the moment.
Okay, let's try sharing again.
I'll share in the normal view first, then, and see what happens. Can you see my screen?
Yes, but right now we have the whole PowerPoint unopened, so we want to see the slide where. So when you click on our side, it won't move because you're sharing a second screen.
I'm not sure what is mean by second screen because I have only one screen in front of me.
I think for the sake of progress, can I just suggest
Yes.
that you click on the slides as you go? Can you just click on the slides? We just want to see if they change. I think we can
Okay,
proceed.
let me do that. So where was I? Did that change?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Let's just
So
try that again,
maybe
just to make sure.
Should I continue this way or?
Yes, let's continue this way, please.
Okay, good. So FIRE can also engage in monitoring and reporting because you need to track the progress of issues related to the SDGs so that you can ensure that the efforts that are being made are on track and help to identify areas that require additional focus. So FIRE can obtain and regularly update information on engineering-related issues that are aligned with the SDGs. And for example, FIRE has been working on the infrastructure report card project. A number of countries have produced infrastructure report cards. They have looked at various areas like water, energy, telecommunications, and so on. And they have graded the infrastructure in their countries and they've collected data on the infrastructure, which later on, of course, their first report cards will provide a baseline, and later on, with updates over the years, you'll be able to see how the country is progressing, maybe towards providing clean water for all, or towards providing energy for all, clean, sustainable energy, and so on. So the infrastructure report card is a very useful tool that FAO has been working on and hopes to get all countries in Africa to adopt. And this can help in monitoring and reporting. We also have a current survey on numbers of engineering practitioners, and I believe maybe some of you may have been approached. In this, FAO is working with SAICI, the Institution of Civil Engineers, their Professional Development and Projects Unit, to collect this data so that we can have more accurate data on numbers of engineering practitioners and their capabilities and so on. These are all important because we have issues where you find people believe maybe we either have the numbers or we don't have the numbers, but we don't actually know because we have not done and have not collated this information. And this is where FAO can come in and really help. So these are some of the ways in which FAO can help to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And in fact, like I indicated at the beginning, FAO's whole mission and vision is all geared towards and aligned towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, what can female engineers do, and what contributions can they also make to help Africa achieve the Sustainable Development Goals? Well, African society often places different expectations on males and females. So you may find in some societies it's the females that go out and fetch water, or the females that look after children, or look after old people, or prepare food, and so on. And therefore, the experiences of these females are different from their male counterparts. In addition, by nature, females are different from men in so many ways. This means that, yes, they grow up with different experiences, and their priorities and needs may also be different from their male counterparts. I mean, if I was engaged in the design of an urban area, my concern may be there shouldn't be any dark spots, there should be enough light, and these lights that we are putting up should be as bright as whatever, because I'll feel much safer if the places are brighter and not so safe when they are dark. And those things may not be the same concerns that my male counterparts would have. It's also important that female engineers recognize that they have a critical role to play in reflecting the priorities and needs of females in any engineering design solution that they are involved in. It is very easy sometimes, especially if you are the only female as amongst a lot of males, to begin to forget that you are even female and begin to forget some of the things that would normally be a priority to females. And therefore, female engineers, I believe, should recognize that they have some responsibilities to reflect the priorities and needs of their other female counterparts in any engineering endeavor in which they are involved. Of course, when it comes to the SDGs, SDG 5, gender equality, that is right down the aisle of female engineers, because they are naturally role models who can inspire and encourage more women and girls to pursue STEM fields. We know that in STEM fields, there's an imbalance in Africa with respect to the numbers of females employed. And just by seeing other females, younger girls realize that they can also do it. And in this way, female engineers can help to create a more inclusive and equitable environment. Female engineers can achieve a lot more if they are organized in professional groups. Thus, as groups, they will not only just encourage the young girls to join the profession, and I know a lot of female engineering groups do this. They go out to basic schools, speak to young girls about STEM and encourage them. But then when they get in, such groups will also be able to support their retention in the profession. We found in Ghana that we were able to get a lot of females into the profession at some time, but very quickly they all were left to join other fields, in banking and so on. So female engineers can also help when it comes to the SDG 7, affordable and clean energy. And energy especially is something that females are usually involved with when it comes to cooking and lighting and so on. And their needs and so on, their experiences can be different from those of men. So they can help to drive innovation, especially in the renewable energy technologies, and improve access to clean and sustainable energy sources. They can also use their expertise to help develop and implement efficient energy solutions that contribute to an energy transition that is more sustainable and more just. So they also can use their very unique perspectives and understanding of the impact of the various solutions on households. If we are moving to gas because we say it's cleaner, how does that affect the women? And how does that affect the children? And therefore, in all these changes that are taking place now, women can help bring in their own unique perspectives and ensure that we have a more just energy transition. When it comes to education, female engineers are naturally, I wouldn't say maybe not naturally, but because of the ways in which we are brought up and so on, we often end up looking after children, teaching, and mentoring. And they can use this experience to help improve the quality of education in STEM fields. They have gone through it. Sorry. They have gone through it. They have an understanding of how to break things down into simple language so that children can learn, so that they will not be so maybe frightened or scared of maths and things like that. So they have a real role to play in helping to ensure that more females and in general, more of our young people get into STEM fields. Of course, by enhancing these opportunities, they can contribute to a skilled workforce that drives economic growth and innovation. And let me just add that one of the things that I have seen female engineers do is actually engage teachers and show them how to break things down into simple language for their students to be able to understand, fields like maths and science, which some would have found a little more difficult. In industry and innovation, again, females can play a very vital role, female engineers, in driving technological advancements and innovations across industries that consider female perspectives. So in everything that we are doing, we need to consider the female perspective, whether it's designing a car or whether it's providing electricity on the streets or whatever, there will be differences and females can contribute in this area. They can also contribute to research, design, and development, which can help create a more sustainable infrastructure and foster economic growth. Then, of course, sustainable cities. There's a lot that is there to do with cities. I mean, anytime I drive around, there's a lot I would have done about the roads, a lot I would have done differently about roads, about pavements on which I walk. Of course, there are certain areas where I would think of the kind of shoes I'm wearing, which will be different from what a man is wearing, and therefore they may have thought differently about the kind of surfaces they were using for pavements, and all those kinds of things. We can ensure that our cities and communities are safer or feel safer for us and are more inclusive and environmentally friendly. Then, of course, we can contribute to creating sustainable living spaces for all residents. This, I just put up a slide. These are some of the things that the Women in Engineering group has been doing. And in fact, in all the other areas, the SDGs have mentioned, we've had women in engineering groups doing things in water and in other areas. Here we have, it's the same goes for their role in environmental conservation and in pollution control and so on. We have the Namibian Women in Engineering. They had worked on the theme Engineering for a Healthy Planet, the Namibian perspective, and so on. So these are some of the things that the women's groups can do. They can contribute, they can take up these subjects and contribute to bring in their own perspectives on these subjects. Then, of course, we need partnerships. And I think that female engineers are very good at building partnerships. And the evidence is there in our Women in Engineering forum. Our chair will bear us out that in the forum we have women from all over the world. There I put a picture of women from all over the world who have been working very well together, very, very collaboratively to achieve so many things together, to run competitions for children, to launch awards for female engineers, recognition for female engineers, and so on. And doing this, they've all brought in their diverse perspectives and skills to the table, and they've been able to foster interdisciplinary approaches to tackle all these complex global challenges that we have. So, finally, let me just say that FIO can serve as a unifying force that brings together engineering professionals from across Africa to collectively work towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And indeed, FIO's membership consists not just of professional engineering institutions, but practically anybody that has any work to do or anything to do with engineering in Africa, because the aim is to be the repository of knowledge, and you can only do that when you have everyone on board. And FIO can provide leadership and coordination and amplify the impact of engineering efforts and contribute to a more sustainable and prosperous future for the continent. Female engineers in particular have significant contributions to make towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. In all its work, FIO has built a lot of partnerships, has relationships with bodies like FIDIC Africa, the African Union, and others, all in the aim to work together to achieve these Sustainable Development Goals. So thank you very much for your attention, and my apologies, I don't know what happened with the slideshow. Thank you.
Thank you for that insightful presentation. I think for the things around PowerPoint, we can put all the blame on Bill Gates. But we got the message very, very, very clear. And for me, the takeaway is the role that women can have in making more inclusive, female-friendly designs. I will take a case in point. I mean, there are many inventions that women have made. The bulletproof vest is one of them. The material that goes in the bulletproof. The men were happy to get to let people go to war and get shot, you know. But the women, as nurturers, as you mentioned, made that contribution. But for this stage here, clearly the person who designed this stage was clearly not a short person, right? So the person thought that as long as they're here, they'll be able to see the audience. But thank you for that. It is a very compelling proposition that you're making, and one that we'll take away with us. All right, then before we continue, we went through a lot of our African countries at the Brown Monday that we got representatives, but there was somebody from India, and I was very keen to know who that person is. Is that person in the audience today? There we go. A round of applause, please. So the Africa Engineering Week marketing team, we have clearly gone cross-continental now. So please, let's send our advertisements on social media channels, even to other continents. But welcome and thank you very much for joining us. Our next speaker is Engineer Amos Marawa. Engineer Amos, there is a very famous sports presenter here in South Africa. His name is Robert Marawa. Are you maybe related to him? Because we had Dr. Malinga the other side, but then today is Mr. Marawa. Well, we'll talk about that at the gala dinner. Engineer Amos Marawa is the Deputy Chief Secretary in the Office of the President Zimbabwe, and he will have some remarks to share with us. Thank you very much. Engineer Amos Marawa.
Good morning, everybody. Okay, I may as well talk to myself. I said, good morning, everybody. Good morning. You see, that's more pleasing. Mr. Moderator, thank you very much for inviting me to, as you say, some remarks, which by inference means I have a free topic. I can say whatever I wish to say. Please allow me to stand on the protocols already established. And first to say that it came up during the discussions quite a lot to say there are a lot of risks in engineering, and some comparison was made with other professions. But no one also mentioned that there is a risk of ambush, even in engineering circumstances. And talking of ambushes, I must say I was a victim of that. Some very beautiful lady came and said, "Good morning, engineer. Thanks for coming to this session. Can I invite you to speak at this session, which is starting in 2 minutes?" And I don't know whether it was bravery on my side or otherwise to accept to present in a session where we have distinguished speakers who had presentations prepared beforehand. Anyway, since it's an engineering function, and I'm an engineer. Let me take that risk and try to say something meaningful. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have really come a long way, given that it is the 9th UNESCO African Week and the 7th Federation of Engineering Organization under the African Union. And also to say, even as we are talking about this conference, it's already in our 3rd day. And I must paraphrase to say, as engineering institutions, we have really done quite a lot in terms of representing the collective interests of our engineering profession, looking at representing our members and ensuring that as we practice engineering, we enhance the level of professionalism that is expected of us. And I think governments have also recognized the importance of our profession. Most of us have actually been educated and graduated from our national institutions across the continent. Some may have actually done so from institutions abroad, which is a clear indication that if in our universities we have created engineering faculties under whatever name is appropriate for each institution, it means government has recognized, as the Vice President said in his opening speech, where he quoted a governor from Colorado in the United States of America, and simply said that those nations that trained engineers were actually more prosperous than those that trained lawyers, as an example. I'm paraphrasing here. And the key message from that quotation was to say no country had actually sued itself to greatness. So it is important to realize that governments across Africa have recognized the engineering profession, and that us, through our collective organizations, have also done a lot to improve in terms of the professionalism of our engineering field, and that we should do more to work with government to ensure that we improve in terms of the policies, the strategies that are necessary to bring sustainable development through the infrastructure development and its enabling effect on the entire economies of our countries. I need to just make a comment on something that I felt needed to be emphasized as we went through different sessions as we started on Monday. Clearly, we have in our countries institutions, either as an engineering institute or engineering councils that have been established through various legal requirements, be an act depending on the legal jurisdictions that are pertaining to our countries. But I think creating those institutions helps us, at least as a profession, to be organized. But I think for us to make more impact in terms of working with government and regional institutions, we need to institutionalize the role of engineers in national economic development. The role of engineers through their institutions need to be clearly defined and spelled out in the statutes of the countries, whereby starting at every level of development, from planning, implementation, operations, maintenance, and even resource planning, the role of engineers need to be clearly spelled out so that we can be part and parcel of government procedures. In my country, we have, through our Vision 2030, where we aspire to be a middle-income society, we have established 16 thematic working groups across government. And we have a thematic group that is dealing with infrastructure and utilities. But when you delve down in, even in that structured manner, you will see that there is no clearly defined role for the engineering institution and councils to play. Maybe the situation may be different in other countries, but I want to believe this is an area which is the missing link in order to ensure that we as engineers, our profession, should actually be a catalyst for development in our jurisdictions. Looking across the participants here, and thanks, I am happy that we have a representation from outside Africa. We have just applauded and recognized a representative from India. I am happy that even at this stage, the panelists here, distinguished panelists, we have a representative from the AU. But I think there are also some missing critical institutions. The AU has already, as it marches towards the creation of the African Economic Community, which is the overall objective of the African Union, has already recognized that we have the regional economic communities as the building blocks for achieving the African Economic Community, which means the regional economic communities are partners in attaining even the Agenda 63 that we mentioned here and creating the Africa all we want. But in our midst, we don't have a single representative at an official level from any of the regional economic communities. I know we have sub-regional organizations of our engineering organizations. Even in SADC, it's not actually a SADC institution. It so happens to be an institution that is created within the sub-region of SADC. But when you delve down into the institutional framework of SADC, you won't see it being recognized as such. And it has no specific or dedicated role that it should be playing as we implement these regional programs, regional integration programs under SADC. And this is the challenge that I want to bring to this organization, to this conference, that I think we need to start from our national government structures that will institutionalize the profession of engineering. And through that, we take it to our sub-region, to the regional economic communities. Every member of the African Union belongs to one, in some cases, 2 or 3 regional economic communities. And I think if we set up our institutional structure, which then clearly spells out our roles, then clearly we will bring the impact that we need to put to bear and bring sustainable economic development faster to our regions. So this is the one thing that I need to say, that yes, at AU level, but clearly we need to start with the sub-regions. But going beyond that, even if you look at the international institutional structure under the UN, some of our colleagues in different spheres have already had technical institutions that are fully recognized under the United Nations. The first one that comes to mind, people are talking about COVID, and we all know the role that WHO, World Health Organization, played. It is a world-recognized technical institution under the ICAO. We also know about World WMO, World Meteorological Organization. It's a technical institution recognized under the United Nations framework. I was listening tentatively to the jealousies or the fights or the petty talks that the moderator was elaborating regarding civil, mechanical, and electrical engineers. And I dare say some of our lesser-known engineers, the aeronautical engineers, have already beaten us to it. Under the United Nations, we already have the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is spearheading the development of international aviation and developing world standards that are implemented by each and every country, including all of us represented here. And I must say, I think in terms of impact, you were talking of roads, you're talking of houses, you're talking of everything. Already, the term sheet or template is there. If the aeronautical engineers have done it, I'm sure the collective, total collective of the engineering expertise, we can actually do better and ensure that our institution also has international recognition. I thought I would just share these few points and really come to what I think the moderator wanted me to say, simply to summarize maybe some of the key takeaways regarding some of the proceedings that took place since Monday here. I'm not saying I have taken every takeaway as a message in my summation, but I believe we have made key takeaways that we can also take as recommendations. And coming to recommendations, I think somebody was mentioning recommendations that were made at Mauritius. And going back to my issue of institutionalization, I think if our institutions are recognized through the institutional structure of the AU, we should be able to influence the binding decisions that are taken at the regional level as well as the AU level. After the summits at AU and REX level, the heads of states normally bring out communiques and spell out declarations, some which are binding, some which are just to give information and for members to implement as they wish. And I think if we attain that recognition and being institutionalized, we can influence the structure and the implementation modalities of some of the protocols that come out of the continental discourse. Yesterday, we talked about mobility under the African Continental Free Trade Area, and we made the point that maybe our institutions should actually critically look at the institutional framework and try to address the issue of mobility of engineers, not only engineers, of the business people and everybody that has a role to play to ensure that African Continental Free Trade Area is a success. So it is in this regard that I am summarizing some of the key institutions. And the first one is to say that we are recommending that we establish an African engineering education think tank to facilitate the intellectual discourse and coordinate the ongoing initiatives as well as new ones, and also to promote homegrown solutions and linkages to the global bodies and alliances in engineering education. The think tank should be inclusive in its membership including representatives from governments, the academia, industry, private sector, civil society organizations, development partners, regional organizations I've just mentioned, also including ADEA that has just made a presentation here, and the African Union as our mother body, including the REX, and not to leave out the African diaspora. The second takeaway is that we should work collaboratively with governments in putting in place actionable policies and strategies in engineering education. Number 3, develop relevant tools such as database of African engineers, profiling who they are, their areas of expertise, etc., and an accreditation manual. B, we should also develop frameworks such as the African Engineering Mobility Framework I just referred to earlier. We should, as mentioned, this is taken from presentation from ADEA, establish an African accord to bring together African countries in promoting engineering education and strengthening the continent's collective voice in the global arena. Last but not least, leverage existing structures and policy forums within the African Union and ADEA to promote evidence-informed policies and decision-making, and forums as platforms for peer learning and knowledge exchange for engineering education in Africa. Mr. Moderator, I think with these few remarks, I have taken up the challenge, and I wish to thank everybody for listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Engineer Marawa, for that, for those insightful points and the challenge that you have presented to us to copy our fellow aeronautical engineers, for us to be present on the world stage, but also to be intertwined into the economic fabric of our various economic zones. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our morning session. I want to just re-emphasize the 3 announcements that were made. The first one is the CPD accreditation at reception. The second one, and probably this is probably the most important one for today, because we need to make sure that we finalize the numbers, that we register for the site visits that will be happening tomorrow. So there are 2, so you have to pick one. Then the third one is around business matchmaking. Then going on to lunch, right? I know it's it sounds like I'm jumping over a number.